Okay, everybody. Michael J. Freer. All right, everybody, welcome to class number 4 on Journey of the Soul. Tonight's class is a very, very interesting one, and one that I'm sure many people might have even joined the class for, because many of us are thinking, what happens to us after the time? Where do we go? Does Judaism believe in heaven? Does Judaism believe in hell? If we believe in hell, do we believe in the guy with the pitchfork, and the red horns, or do we believe in the guy with the white robe and the harp? We see it a lot on TV and in the movies. What is it exactly that we believe in? So you can bet that everything that we believe, everything that society has a strong opinion on, Judaism definitely has a very, very strong opinion on, and especially heaven and hell. And we're going to get into reward and punishment because that is interconnected. So as always, we're talking about a sensitive topic, something that I'm sure a lot on your mind. So feel free to ask questions, to put it in the chat. Let me see. Let me open up the chat here. And you can always chat, ask a question, or you can just interject. We are going to start now with a video explaining about the attitude about going from one place to another. And 1 second, Joseph, did I? Oh, wrong. I'm playing. I'm sorry. I have the wrong slideshow. Give me 1 second. The video and get the slideshow. I apologize. I'm actually in my parents' house because from closing I went to visit someone in Boca and I ran out of time. So I'm not in my office, as you can see from the beautiful background. I didn't move offices. Okay, so. You ever notice that when we see in the movies things of aliens and things like that, the aliens always kind of look like us. They always have 2 eyes, some kind of hands, some kind of feet. Why is that? Because the human condition is we cannot imagine something outside our realm of existence. This is where we are. So even people who do science fiction or futuristic books and all that, and they make predictions for the future, it's all based on the reality. So for example, there was an article, it's gone around WhatsApp, of a guy in the 1950s, and he said, one day the phones will be in our pockets, we'll walk around and we'll have a device that we can see who it is we're talking to. And back in the 50s, that was like a really novel advice and no one thought it was possible. But if you think about it, that wasn't such a crazy idea. Why is that? Because they had phones and they had television, just no one thought how you can combine the two. So let's take the flying car, for example, right? When we were all young, we were sure that, about a year, 2015, 2020, 2030, we're going to have flying cars. And some of us said, no, it can't be done. Again, if you think about it, there's no reason why it can't be done. We have the concept of a car and we have the concept of an airplane. The question is, how do we put those two together? There was a very interesting article, and I'll post the article you can read the entirety of the article. This was Slate magazine, I believe, by an author named Lawrence Krauss. And he said, science fiction, though it can inspire human imaginations, as Stephen Hawking said in the preface of my book, The Physics of Star Trek, is fundamentally limited. It is based on human imagination and past experience. This is a great thing, but it doesn't mean the science fiction future will resemble our own. So let me ask you, before I give you the answer, which invention over the past 30 years totally, think about me, you guys are older than me, which invention do we have now you think is totally outside the realm of really not only possible, that what you thought would happen? Anybody?
Nothing.
Anything?
I don't have anything.
No. So
Yeah, the
this,
cell phone, the touch cell phone.
the touch
like an
cell phone,
Apple.
yeah, but back when you were a kid, we had a cell phone. We had a phone. It's not it's a different type of phone. So this Lawrence Krauss writes in his article, he says, as a child, I expected to be driving in a flying car or vacationing in a near Earth orbit. What I didn't expect was the internet. Of all the technological developments that have changed the way modern society functions, perhaps none has presented such a disruptive challenge to society. It has changed everything about how we communicate. And he goes on and on and on. And I will post the article in the chat. So what we see over here is that the way we think always is what we are used to, and something that's totally beyond our reality. We can't fathom. So here we're going to speak about. I'm getting the link. So here we're speaking about heaven and hell. Sorry, where does the soul go to? And our problem is that we many times we think about places of fire and pleasures, but the reality is, I'm posting the link to what the Slate article, man. It's in the chat. The reality is that we cannot fathom such an existence. There's a beautiful song, and I'm going to post it. And the video, the first video in the slideshow, is about it. It's about two children in the womb, and they can't imagine any world outside the womb, and they're having a conversation. Is there life after life? So Judaism tells us, it's interesting. I heard the Rebbe didn't believe in the word afterlife, because there's no such thing afterlife. We've spent 3 classes discussing how the soul is always alive. It's alive before, it's alive during, it's alive after. So there's birth after the womb and birth after the tomb. Is there life after life? That's really the question. So obviously we know the answer. The answer is yes. Oh, my slideshow is. Oh, I got the right one. Again, I apologize for the mistake. I had the wrong slideshow on the computer. I'm now going to share my screen. And you guys see the slideshow?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Now we do.
Yes? Okay. Here we go.
Birth and death are as contradictory as night and light. But they are strangely associated with an identical Hebrew word, kever. Kever means a tomb where a body is buried. But kever also means a womb where life is formed. A womb is a gateway to life, while a tomb is a gateway to afterlife. But is there an afterlife? Or does laying a body to rest in a grave mark the absolute end? If it were within our power to interview a soul, we would undoubtedly glean insight into afterlife. Instead, we have chosen to eavesdrop on a set of twins in their mother's womb to shed some light on the before life.
Hey, twin, I'm scared of birth.
Why?
It's the end of existence. We get ejected. We're finished.
I'm also anxious, twin, but I'm not scared. Birth is supposed to be a transition to the real life.
Huh. Don't give me the hiccups with your after-birth real-life fantasies. How can life be supported without an umbilical cord and amniotic fluid?
Well, maybe it's a radically different form of life. Maybe we won't need the cord.
I wish you were right. I keep kicking that thing away from my neck.
Stop spinning for a minute and imagine, twin. After birth, we will enter a ginormous universe filled with light and with air that we will breathe through our mouths.
Come on, grow some brain cells, will you? Mouths are not for breathing. Besides, if your postnatal paradise existed, why has no one ever returned from that realm? Forget it. Once we leave here, we collapse into cold, dry nothingness and wither into eternal gloom.
I don't think Mother would allow that to happen. She nurtures us in this cozy womb. She sends us nutrients for months on end. For what purpose? Just to end it all with birth? No. Mother has greater plans for us than that.
Now you're beginning to sound infantile. Do you see a mother lurking in some corner of the womb? Not a trace. Show me a mother. And as for your nutrients, can't you feel that annoying cord? Don't exchange empirical for fantastical.
Thankfully, these two delightful infants made it safely to the other side. They grew up in the universe that one had described and the other had denied. And until today, they continue their clamorous debate. It is only that the topic of contention has slightly shifted from, is there life after the womb, to, is there life after the tomb?
Okay, so I'm also going to post in the class the YouTube link to the wonderful song a guy made on this midrash. Very, very beautiful content. So it's like this. The obvious answer is we are born twice. That means when we are in our mother's stomachs, in our mother's womb, that is our reality. We can't imagine any other reality. So to ask a infant, imagine a world where you're disconnected and you can make your own decision and all the things, they can't fathom it. Same thing for us. We are here in this physical realm. So for us to imagine a what quote unquote afterlife with the pleasures and the punishments is very, very difficult. So let's go to page 128. Let's do this exercise. What do you think the Jewish view of the afterlife is? What do you think the Jewish view of the afterlife is? Anybody want to pitch in with their what they feel like? I won't make fun of you. I won't say right or wrong. This is the part where you guys chime in. No. What do you think the afterlife looks like in Jewish philosophy, Jewish theology? No. Anybody want to know? Want to share an answer? What they want to know more about the Jewish view in afterlife? Or you want to know if there is an afterlife or what it looks like? Okay, guys, everybody's a little bit shy. That's the point. It's class 4 already. You guys got to be more comfortable. So, obviously we want to believe in the pleasures of heaven, but do we believe in hell? What does hell look like? The heat, the hell, the burning. Do we believe in eternal damnation? Exercise number 2, page 129. When you hear the word hell, what comes to your mind? You know the old joke. A man from Illinois wanted to leave the snow and the COVID, so he comes down for a vacation in Florida, but he has some business to do, so he went a few days before his wife. When he reached Florida, he checked into the hotel. He typed his wife an email. Unfortunately, he wasn't paying attention as he was writing, and one letter was off, and a different woman received his email. That woman just got up from Shiva, and she opens them up and says, "Dear sweetie, this is your husband. Want to let you know that I checked in and everything, and everything is okay. I'm preparing for your arrival in a few days. P.S. I just want to let you know it's very hot down here. So the question is, when we think of hell, what do we think of? So before we get to that, because heaven and hell are really based on how we view reward and punishment. Because what's heaven and hell a result of? Reward and punishment. So let's get into the exercise on page 4.3. I want you guys to do this exercise on your own. You don't have to share the answers. This is on page 130. I want you to rate, 1 being the least pleasurable, 10 being the most pleasurable. Take a moment and do this exercise. And try to do it as honestly as possible. And we are going to come back to this exercise later in the class. Again, if anyone has questions, in the meantime, I'm going to get that link for that song. All right, let me get the. Here. I'm posting the link to that song. It's called "Conversation in the Room." There you go. And I did it to Gabriel. I'm going to do it to everybody. All right, let's get into reward and punishment. And this is Harry. 131. Who wants to read page 131? Any volunteers? Elizabeth, did you read last time?
I did. I read.
Okay, so we got to get anybody. Gabriel, you want to read page 131?
My English is not so good, so I don't know if you want me to read.
Your English is fine. Your English is fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I will do it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Judaism regards death as the freedom of the soul from the constraints of the physical realm and is returned to leading a purely spiritual existence. The post-corporeal stage in the soul's experience is colloquially known as the afterlife. While the soul is freed from corporeal existence, it continues to be influenced by the experiences it accumulates during its stay inside the human body. In fact, the soul's experience in the afterlife is entirely shaped by its actions here in this world. Good actions are rewarded in a state that we refer to as heaven. Wicked actions are expiated in a stage that we refer to as hell to better understand the phenomenon of afterlife. It is imperative to explore the mechanism that shapes it, namely the divine system of reward and punishment, as viewed in the unique and perhaps surprising Jewish understanding of the topic.
Thank you, Gabriel. You did great.
Thank you.
Even though you say, what are you talking about? Okay, so usually when we think of heaven and hell, the image in our mind, we have heaven is this beautiful place of rainbows and tables of sweets and candy, and hell is this place of punishment and hurt. So in our minds, heaven and hell are kind of these two distinct places, two separate destinations that either you go over there or you go to the other place. But in reality, what we're going to learn tonight, that it's really actually not that way. Reward and punishment, which are heaven and hell, is one of the fundamental beliefs in Judaism, that God cares about what we do, and there are results and consequences that happen as a result of our actions. And these results or consequences can come in both physical forms and spiritual. So you have some people that are very righteous, but they suffer down here. Talmud says, because God wants to make sure they have a totally clean trip in the world to come. And some people, And some people, they have it very good here, not so good, not so good over there. How do we know? How do we know that reward and punishment is so important? So look at page 132, text 1a, and it says over here, the 11th of the 13 principles of faith is that God cares about what we're doing, and there's reward and punishment. And what is the punishment? What kind of reward is the punishment? The greatest reward is the world to come, and the greatest punishment is the lack of. So, spiritual reward is the best, because if you remember from class number 1, we said there's nothing more important than the time down here, but there's nothing more pleasurable than the world, than the time up there. That means the spiritual reward we get is so much greater than any reward you can have over here. So let's think about the exercise we did before. When you're younger, you don't appreciate good things. So, for example, young people like candy. You go to a young person, try to give them, over the age of 18, 21, try to give them a glass of wine. They'll say, nah, dry wine doesn't taste good. You get older, you appreciate it. Or classical music, something you appreciate, or art, or even higher than that, an intellectual concept. There's a pleasure in understanding a deep concept. So we see over here that our definition of pleasure changes over time. What we thought was so pleasurable 20, 30 years ago may not be such a big deal for us right now. So what we can't imagine the pleasure of the soul has in the world to come. But one thing's for sure, the pleasure there is so much greater. So this explains why the soul doesn't really get to enjoy its pleasure down here, because there's nothing in this world that is as pleasurable and as intense as what the soul appreciates up there. Now there's a question, which is on page. Have you ever wondered? Have you seen that in your book? The question, have you ever wondered? There's a question, if the spiritual reward is so great, how come it doesn't say it anywhere in the Torah? If you look at the Torah, what kind of rewards are stated in the Torah? The rewards are physical, right? God's going to give us physical bounty, material bounty. Spiritual rewards are in there. It's a very interesting answer. And what time is it? So getting a little late. But you see Appendix A on page 2. No, where is it? Appendix A. End of this class. What is it? Appendix A. There.
Page 157.
Thank you. I had 250. I knew it didn't make sense. Page 250. Yeah, on page 156. Right. Page 156. The promise of reward. So it explains over there exactly why it's written and why it's that. There's a lot of ink has been spilled on this concept. But I'll just share with you one by the Shalav of Yishai Horowitz, and he says, "Who said it's not a spiritual reward?" One of the beliefs and one of the things that we know our Kabbalists tells us is that the Torah exists on multiple levels. So, for example, what's the soul doing in the Garden of Eden the whole time? What does the soul do the whole time? You ever ask yourself that question? What does it do?
Eat fruit.
Huh?
Eat fruit.
Eat fruit, right? Not eating organic fruit. Organic fruit. It shops at Whole Foods and it can afford it. That's why I tell you. So it says that it's learning Torah. But the question is, if there's souls and nothing to do with a body experience, like we read in the portion 2 weeks ago, 2 Shabbos ago, about physical damage, material damage. What does the soul know about oxen and bulls and pits and everything else? So Kabbalah explains the Torah exists on multiple levels simultaneously. It exists in a spiritual way. It's understood in a spiritual way, and it's understood in a physical way. So the Shalah says the reward, when it says rain, down here it's understood as rain. But in the spiritual level, rain means blessing and everything else. It's not a contradiction. But let's go back. You could read the appendix on your own time. It's very interesting. I encourage you to do so. Let's go back because there's a question that should be bothering you. It should be bothering all of us. The Rambam didn't say that reward and punishment is an important idea. Like Shabbos in Judaism is an important idea. Passover in Judaism, important idea. Shofar, tefillin. But the Rambam didn't include those in the fundamental of Judaism. What's the difference between a fundamental idea and an important idea? What's the difference? The difference is that an important idea, it's important, but the Judaism can exist in theory without it. In theory. If we didn't have Passover, could we still have Judaism? It's hard to imagine it without it, but yeah. But the Rambam is saying here, without reward and punishment, this is the foundation. Without this, without these 13 things, you don't have Judaism. Now, let me ask you a question. I believe, generally, I'm a good guy. No matter what my mother-in-law tells me that I'm a bum, generally, I'm a good guy. And I would argue that you guys are also pretty good people. Is that what God thinks of us? That unless you threaten us or promise us candy, that's why we listen? That's what you think of me? Don't you think that, listen, you're God and you're a special being and I want to follow you? Why does the Torah get into the whole reward and punishment, the notion of a great, benevolent, and infinite God sitting there with a golf scorecard and a little pencil and writing down, Michael J. Pray today, check for him. Hey, skip the word and pray out X for him. I mean, it seems below God to keeping score of what he's doing, and also that's what God thinks of us. That unless he talks to us that way, we're not going to listen. No, so it seems very belittling. It seems very petty. Like God has nothing better to do. So first of all, the simple answer to that argument is, how many of us would stay at red lights and not speed if there were no cops or cameras around? I'll come out straight out, and I'll be honest with you, I would not be one of those people. To me, red lights are an absolute waste of time.
It's suggestions rather than rules, huh?
What?
You say that red lights are suggestions, not rules.
Exactly. Especially after 1 a.m.
That's another story. I don't even know why they're running after one.
Exactly. It's a clerical error. Right? So those people who really make that argument, they're being a little bit, they're not being honest, because only the people who are absolutely selfless, altruistic, and true, and people who live without any ulterior motives would do what they're supposed to. How many of that fits? That description fits us perfectly. Altruism is beautiful, but let's get down, to reality. Most of us are not like that. By the way, you look at Appendix B, very interesting. Maimonides writes, what is it? Page 150, 153. All my page numbers are
158.
158. Sorry. on page 158, Maimonides writes that how do we educate a child? First, we offer him candy, and then when he's older, we offer him nice clothing, and then when he's older, we tell him to learn. So this way he gets position, but that's all bad because that's not why you do something good. So incentive has to be there to get the person on the right path, but that is not why we should be doing it. We should be doing it because that's the right thing. But here we see that why does God do it? God's telling us this is the fundamental of Judaism. This is what Maimonides says. God's saying, because if you listen to me, you'll get spiritual candy. If you don't listen to me, you're going to get the spiritual stick. That doesn't seem to jive. Now, what kind of reward are we talking about? So like Larry said, fruit. Bad news, Larry. It's not fruit. Text number 2. Oh, sorry. Actually, I jumped ahead. Did I skip the text? Oh, sorry. I referenced the text. Sorry, my mind went ahead. So the Recanati says, let's go a little bit deeper into what reward and punishment is. I remember when I was a kid, I grew up in a school that the teachers were allowed to hit the kids, and I misbehaved a few times, and I got hit. I know it's hard as it to believe. But let me ask you a question: is there any connection between the bad act, the misbehavior, and the spanking? Or if your kid did something wrong and you grounded them, is there any connection between the grounding and the behavior? The answer is no. That's a result that you chose, but you could have chose something else. The fact that you could have chose something else, it displays that it's not a result. It's a arbitrary. That's actually the right word. Punishment means where the occurrence that is happening to the person was chosen by the authority. The Recanati, look at text number 10. The Recanati is saying something very powerful over here. He said that's not the way it is. Look at text number 2, and he says, don't look the punishments of the Torah as a penalty for disobeying the law. Not at all. Rather, they're natural consequences. Someone who fails to observe the Torah denied good that normally results from its observance. It's comparable to someone who doesn't plant, sow his field. And then later says, oh my God, I had no food to eat. Did you plant? No. Someone goes outside, in the freezing cold weather, and he's not wearing a coat and he's cold. That's not a punishment. That's a result. Same thing is the nature of a mitzvah to provide positive consequences that are promised for its observance, or the negative consequences that are stated regarding its transgression. So we have to take the word reward and punishment out, because they're not reward and punishment. What they truly are positive consequences and painful consequences. That's all. They're results. They are not reward and punishment. Let's take an example. We all work, or some of us are retired.
Well, some of us.
Right. Some of us are a rabbi, some of us are retired, right? But you know what I mean, right? Why do you go to work? To get money. What do you do with the money? You buy food, right? Or you pay your bills. Now, if you look at it this way, is there any real connection between the money and the food? No, society decided that if you do A, I'm going to give you money. And society decided that if you go to the store and you give them this paper and it's a promissory note, they'll give you the food. But there's no true connection. The proof is different stores have different prices. Different countries have different currency. Some people can do the exact same job and get paid differently because there's no intrinsic and true connection. The money is not a result of the work. It's something that we as a society decided. However, if you sow your field and you reap and then you make food, that's not a reward. It's a consequence. You plant, you reap, you eat. That's the way that's the way the world works. So what the Rekanti is saying over here is that the Torah's view on reward and punishment is what you see on the screen. It's a consequence. It's not some arbitrary system that God set up. If you listen to me, I'll give you spiritual candy. If you don't, I'm the boss and I'm going to punish you. And this, by the way, think about it, gives you a lot more belief in you and me. Because if you just believe in reward and punishment as something that God had to do, then it's not, what we're basically saying is that God's system of reward and punishment is a concession to the frail nature of the human condition. But now we're saying is not at all. So imagine like this. Imagine you went to the doctor and the doctor says, listen here, you got to do exercise, you can't smoke, you can't drink. Because listen here, because if you smoke and drink, what I'm going to do to you is I'm going to make you not healthy. But if you listen to me and you exercise, you're going to be healthy. Obviously, that's not what the doctor is telling you. The doctor is telling you that as a result of taking care of yourself, you're going to be healthy, usually. And a result of not taking care of yourself, if things are going to happen. Any questions? All this makes sense? Any questions?
No.
No? Okay. This is why, let me check the chat. This is why, oh wow, everyone's quiet on the chat today. Look at that. You guys are all for schlafen. You're all sleeping. This is why, if you look in Ethics of Our Fathers, this is text number 3, page 135, it says the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. The result, the retribution of a sin is a sin. Now, on the surface, it means, that the reward is that you did one mitzvah and now you have the opportunity to do another mitzvah. And this way you'll be rewarded even more because you did more good acts, and God forbid the opposite. But Chassidus explains, no. Look deeper. Schar mitzvah. The reward of a mitzvah is the mitzvah. Is the mitzvah itself. What does the word mitzvah mean? The word mitzvah means is it is a connection, that you forge a connection. For those who are, who have good relationship with somebody, parent, spouse, friend, there's certain pleasure in just hanging out and being next and being near that person. And you don't even have to do anything, just the fact that you're connected. So the reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. So when a person, God forbid, does an avera, and we say the retribution of the sin is the sin, then what happened? A person robbed himself of his own dignity. And when a person, if a person, let's say, works 7 days a week, it doesn't take a time out to truly put focus on what's important. Who's losing here? He is. The very sin. Or so let's say a person doesn't respect his family members, doesn't respect his wife, doesn't respect his kids. So what's the punishment, so to speak? The negative atmosphere in the house. That's not a punishment. That's the consequence. The retribution for the sin is the sin itself. So not only does this apply to everyday action, this also applies to what we're calling the afterlife. What we do, what we do every single day, that sets the stage of what the afterlife will be. If we do good deeds, if we do mitzvot, then after 120 years, our connection, our relationship with God will be a pleasurable one and with no hiccups. And if we lived up to our capability, if we lived up to who we truly can be, then we can meet God and without shame. But if we sold ourselves short, if we didn't do what we were supposed to, then what happens? That we come up there, and we're witness to who we really could have been. And not only that, we appreciate who we really could have been, and we look back and at the foolish, idiotic actions we took, and it's shame. Look at text number 4. Creating fire and pleasure.
Sorry, excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah.
It's Esther.
Yeah.
I don't understand. What is the retribution for sin? Is only sin. It's not something to emotion to me to make. Well, of course, in another book, in others classes, you say, of course, the rewards of the mitzvah is the mitzvah in because is this the opportunity to demonstrate our faith in God. But how about bad person? That he like to make sin. He only receives sin. Imagine Hitler. Only he receives sin.
Okay, I think you said a bunch of questions together. Let's take one question at a time. Okay, so first of all, it's important to note that one explanation in the Torah doesn't negate the other. We're digging deeper. So on the surface, it means that one mitzvah, one good deed, God gives you the ability to do another good deed in order that you can sow the rewards later. When one person does one bad thing, that leads to another bad thing. That's what it was on the surface. Chassidus, we're taking it even deeper. We're saying that it's not that it leads to another act, because in reality, then there's no value in the act itself. What we're saying over here is the act itself is the good thing, because you're creating a positive story about yourself, and you're creating the very act itself. It fuses the soul with positivity. The negative act itself, it tarnishes the soul. So the afterlife, the heaven and hell that you see on the screen, is the world that we create with our actions. That's why you see text number 4. The fires of Gehenna or hell are stoked in direct proportion to the degree in which the wicked fan their fiery passion. That's the Zohar. Accordingly, we must say the Gan Eden, paradise, is amplified by the tremendous passion that the righteous invest in their Torah study and in the performance of God's commandments. They take great pleasure and delight in God Himself, and their deeds generate a corresponding abundance of life. Interesting, by the way, I was reading up for the class that I wrote it down somewhere. Oh, the name Gehenna. Anyone know where the name Gehenna comes from? I was reading up. This comes from. It's a verse in the book of Joshua. It says, comes from a place in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, which is near Jerusalem. First mentioned in the book of Joshua, describing the border between Judah and Benjamin. There was a place where the Jews worshipped idols, sacrificed their children. Also mentioned in the book of Kings, book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah prophesies that this place will be called Gay Hariga, the valley of killing. So Gay Hinnom, where the idol worshippers will be punished. Anyway, that's where the name comes from. Just a little bit. So this gives us a very, very, very different view of what the perspective of what the afterlife is. It's not something that a place of punishment that we do bad things here, and God takes us to this room where all these terrible things happen to us. Or we do good things, God takes us to this room where we appreciate and benefit from all these things. No. What we do today, what you do with your time on earth, that creates, you are creating your own heaven and hell. That's it. There's an old anecdote of this builder. He is a big home builder, say Lennar, and he had his favorite contractor, guy, his right-hand man who worked with him for 20, 30 years. And finally the guy said, to 20 years, 30 years, I'm ready to retire. So the head builder, the head builder says, do me a favor, stay on one more job, one more house. The guy's heart wasn't in it. He wanted to be out of there already. He already set his mind on retirement. He used, shoddy materials, and he used, and the workmanship, the craftsmanship was poor. It wasn't made well. And when he was finished, the builder handed the keys to the contractor and said, here's my gift of appreciation to you for all your years of hard work. What happens is a direct result of what you and I do, nothing else. In the words of my mother, you have no one to blame but yourself. We're going to watch a video, a meditation of Rashay Tao explaining this point.
Today's reflection meditation is going to help us begin to appreciate the massive influence that we have by performing one small deed here in this physical world while our souls are in bodies. There's somewhat of a paradox. On one hand, you see, we know that the physical world is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just one layer or level of reality, and that there is so much more to reality behind, in back of this veneer that we see, the physical world that we see. There are spiritual worlds behind spiritual worlds, behind spiritual worlds. And yet, at the same time, we know that what we do in this lowest world, in the physical world, has repercussions in the highest heavens. How do we wrap our minds around that paradox? That on one hand, we're in the lowest world, and on the other hand, we are affecting what goes on in spiritual realms. So the reflection that will help us with this is the visualization of a metaphor. Very simple metaphor. Imagine, if you will, a lever. What's a lever? A lever is basically two things. It's a stick and a wedge. You put the stick on the wedge, called the fulcrum, and you can lift things much bigger than you could without the lever. Now imagine you're lifting a big boulder, let's say. If you have a long enough lever, it's possible. Now when you are moving the long side of the stick, think about the fact that when you're moving that end just a little bit, it's causing massive fluctuations on the other end. That's like our world. On one hand, we're very far away from the fulcrum, but it's precisely because we're far away, then little movements on this end cause massive movements on the other end. Try to imagine yourself doing a mitzvah, a physical act. Something small in that it lasts for a moment. It takes place in one specific location. In that sense, it's small. And now imagine how that small movement is really moving the long side of the stick, the long side of the lever. Imagine how your small movement here in this world is causing massive movements in the heavens. we'll take a moment to visualize and to try to feel the leverage, the power that our small actions have.
Okay, so let's get to the elephant in the room. Hell. You know, you tell somebody you don't like, go to hell, right? What are you telling them? We believe in such a thing. One thing's for sure, right? It's not the devil. It's not the devil's playground. It's not the guy with the pitchfork, and that's not what it is. So what is it? What purpose does it serve? And do souls stay there forever? So let's look at page 137, Gehenim, Soul Catharsis. Larry, you're on camera, you're reading. Go ahead, you didn't read last week. Barbara did, you go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
I had unmuted me. You want me to read number 3 here?
According to Jewish tradition, yeah.
According to Jewish tradition, those who due to their actions in this world are not yet worthy of entering paradise, referred to in the traditional sources as Gan Eden, the celestial Garden of Eden, are redirected. Their destination? A spiritual realm referred to as Gehenna, but often translated as hell. Forget any hellish visions of the deceased getting their just desert or suffering eternal damnation. The idea of Gehenna does not include dramatic images of leaping fires, pitchforks, and horned devils. You could say that Gehenna is nothing like hell. The only common denominator between Gehenna and the common conception of hell is that it is indeed a painful experience for the soul.
So, usually think of hell, we think of fire, then you have the old Jewish joke of these 3 sisterhood ladies are in a car accident after coming back from the sisterhood conference, and they come up and they, and what happened is they said, listen, you weren't so good. And it actually, it was the computer mixed up the software by mistake, sent these ladies to hell instead of to heaven. All of a sudden, the angel in charge of heaven gets a phone call from the angel in charge of hell. Listen, you got to get these ladies out of here. What happened? They made a fundraiser. They collected money for an air conditioner. They're ruining everything. Get them out of here, right? So usually we think of hell, we think of, we think of a fiery, burning place. But in truth, it's not like that at all. Not only it's not like that, it's not even a destination. What it is a process. It's a process of rehabilitation. Think of it this way. If you rent a car or you lease a car, you have to return that vehicle in perfect condition. If the car is scratched or whatever reason, it was your fault, it wasn't your fault, forget about it, right? The fact of the matter is, the car is scratched. You bring it back to Enterprise, they want their brand new car. So what do? They send the car to the shop, and you got to pay the bill. Or I tell you, one time I rented a car, and the guy wanted to charge me a crazy cleaning fee. Said, you rented me a minivan, I have kids. You got to return the car clean. Well, they're charging my $20. I went to the gas station next door, paid $1 for the vacuum cleaner. I cleaned it up, and that's it. That was a pain. That's not a punishment. Yes, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't punishment. My kids made a mess. I had to clean it up. God gives you a perfect soul, holy and pure. It comes back. Now, think about before we get to the future. Before the soul descends on earth, where is the soul? What's the soul doing? It's up there by God's throne, enjoying spiritual bliss, godliness. Why? Because the state in which it is, it can enjoy spiritual bliss. The soul comes down into this world, and now the soul and the body are merged. They're married to each other, and because the temptations of the body, the soul does things it shouldn't. So when it comes back after the 120 sojourn down here in this world, it cannot experience godliness. It can't experience and enjoy spirituality. It's been tarnished. It's been hooked on physical pleasure for too long. What does it need to do? It needs to enter a stint of rehab, not eternal rehab, a stint of rehab, and that is what the soul is for. This Gehenna is soul rehabilitation. So you know, when you do a positive act, right? When you give tzedakah, so obviously for the receiver, he's getting more money, so now he can buy groceries. But when you give tzedakah, there's something, it's turning you into a better person. You're turning into a giver, a more compassionate person. It has an effect on you. Unfortunately, when we do negative things, that has an impact. That has a negative impact on us. So who are we really? We spoke about in lesson 1. We have that part of God inside of us. When we don't live up, to that part of us, when we don't act the way we're supposed to, what it is we can't experience. So what does the soul got to do? It has to be cleansed. It has to be rehabilitated. So Gehenna is not a destination. Gehenna is a stage. And we don't know how long the stage is. Every person's different. Up to 12 months. That's why we say Kaddish for the 11 months. It's some people, the Friedrich Rebbe said, it could be 9-10 months. The person's very righteous, could be done with it in a month. We don't know. We just don't know. So I want to tell you about, talking about Gehenna, that Gehenna is not obviously we don't want to go there, but it's not a destination to be feared, not an eternal destination to be feared. Look at text number 5. Before we read text number 5, I need to give you some background. Out of all the rabbis in the entire Talmud, only one became an heretic. Only one threw off the yoke of Torah study, and his name was Elisha ben Avuya. He was a colleague of Rabbi Akiva. He was a teacher of Rabbi Meir, and he underwent a drastic change. Not only did he become a non-believer, an heretic, he became a moral degenerate. He was a traitor. He actively aided and abetted the murderous Romans when they were very harsh against the Jews. So he went from up here all the way down here. So let's go to text 5. When Elisha ben Avuya, he was known as Acher, something else. Why? Because the sages couldn't call him by his name because that wasn't who he is. He became something else. So when Acher died, the heavenly court said, listen, we can't let him into heaven because he did all these things wrong, and we can't let him into hell. He can't go to hell because of all the Torah. So he was in limbo. So our mayor said, better that he should go to hell and be punished in order that he should enter paradise. You know, imagine telling someone, sometimes you tell someone go to hell, it's a good thing. So it reminds me of a joke. This is a very this is a very modern day joke. There's three people died, 3 workers in the healthcare industry died to come up to heaven. The first guy comes, and the angel in charge of heaven said, "No, what were you?" So I was a doctor. I help people. Oh, you're a doctor. Yeah, you help people live. You get to go to heaven. What were you? The second guy, I was a psychiatrist. I help people feel good and everything else. And so very good. Third guy, what were you? Was I worked for the HMO. I made sure that people got cost-effective care. So he's in heaven. The angel turns around to him and says, "You're here for 3 days. After 3 days, go to hell." Right? So normally you would say you would tell someone the person should go to Gehenna, go to hell, would be a bad thing. But here a mayor is praying for his teacher to go to hell. Why? Because as we said before, Gehenna is not a destination. Gehenna is a stage. And if Acher's soul never goes into Gehenna, he can never enter paradise. It could be never go through the rehabilitation. If he never goes through the restorative stages, then he'll never be able to enter Gan Eden. So think about it. In life, the worst thing you could be is a person without destination. You could be heading down the wrong path, but at least you have a goal. I've told this example, the story many times. There once was the circus came to town, and part of the circus was a tightrope. And the chassid Ramendel Futterfass was there. And so the tightrope walker went over to Ramendel and asked, "Tell me, which one is harder, walking there or walking back?" Ramendel said, "Neither. The hardest thing is turning around." He said, "Why?" I said, "How do you know?" What was the right answer? He said, "Because you don't have your eyes on any target. And that's the hardest thing. When the soul is in limbo, the same thing down here in the physical life. That's the worst thing. Does it say the rest of the story here? So actually, the rest of the story is that where Meir said that when I die, I'm gonna make sure he goes to hell. And if he sees smoke arise from his grave, you'll know that it worked. And when Meir died, smoke arose from his grave. It's interesting, but the Kabbalah says that when we die, spiritual smoke goes from all of our graves. Over here, Meir prayed that should be physical smoke so people can see. For 150 years, the Gemara says smoke rose from Elisha ben Avuya's grave. Till Rabbi Yochanan came and said, "Is it right for a student to roast his teacher?" And he said, "I'm going to pray for it to stop. And when I die, I'm going to pray for it to stop." And when Rabbi Yochanan passed away, the smoke stopped. Anyway, neither here nor there. So let's go to what the Alter Rebbe writes. Text number 6. Alter Rebbe writes, he says, the purpose of Gehenna is to refine the soul and rid it of any sickness it contracted. This is page 139. This is similar to the process of smelting silver, wherein the dross and the sediment is burned away in the furnace, leaving the silver clean and free of impurities. Similarly, for the soul to be able to experience the light of the supernal pleasures and bask in God's radiance, it must first be refined in the spiritual fire of Gehenna, whereby the negative is purged from the positive. So what happens when a soul goes to hell? So Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, and I have his books in the shul, is very, very good. He writes text number 7. What happens is 139 is that imagine you're reliving every experience, both the good and the bad. But in hell, it's the negative experiences, and you're thinking to yourself, how can I be so stupid? There's nowhere to escape. There's nowhere to run. It says, then an individual will see himself in a new light, page 139. Even more in our mortal physical state, looking at oneself. So when you truly do a self-analysis, sometimes it's painful. You look at yourself and you really know something. Take, for example, a very narcissistic person. Everything is about him. And finally he realizes that hold on one second. Sorry. So finally, he realizes that he has to improve. And when he really thinks about the person he's become, it hurts. When you really look at yourself in the mirror, there's true pain because of the people he treated, and also you didn't live up to who you are. So the memory of every good deed, every mitzvah, will be the sublimest of pleasures. But your memory will also be open to all things of which you are ashamed. They cannot be rationalized away or dismissed. You will be facing yourself fully aware of the consequences of all your deeds. We all know the terrible shame and humiliation experienced when one is caught in the act of doing something wrong. Imagine being caught by one's own memory and he can't escape. This is what Gehenna is. Any questions? Yes? No? All's good? So now...
Is this the same for a non-Jewish soul as well as a Jewish soul?
This is no. Jews and Gentiles are not judged the same. Jews and Gentiles are not judged the same because Jews have different responsibilities than Gentiles. So Gentiles, they can earn a place in the world to come if they follow God's commandments. So put it this way, Gentiles have to earn their way in. Jews, because we have a part of God inside of us, we are guaranteed a way in. So if you see, text 8, I already said, go to text number 9, all end up in Gan Eden, because like we said before, Gehenna is only a transitional phase. Now, it doesn't mean a person has to go through 12 months of Gehenna. A person does teshuvah down here, a person repents down here, it can cleanse away the sin. A person goes through suffering and trials and tribulations down here, that's cleansing of sin. My father told me he spent Shabbos with somebody that he lost his father, his brother, and his nephew to COVID. They're suffering. Okay. Let's continue. So paradise, right? Page 142. So until now, we've been talking about the negative, right? What the soul experiences in Gehenna, and it's well worth the suffering because it allows it to bridge the gap to the Garden of Eden. What might happen to the soul after Gehenna? Is it really worth all the suffering? So naturally, it's impossible for mortals whose minds are networks of neurons to fully fathom or appreciate the purely spiritual pleasures that await the disembodied soul. That said, we're capable of relating to spiritual pleasures, right? Going back to the exercise, right? You appreciate music. You appreciate friendship. You appreciate companionship. That's a spiritual pleasure. Scientific studies on coping with loss and grief have demonstrated that significant benefits that spring from an understanding that the departed soul is now in a better place, a place devoid of pain and struggles that characterizes the life in this world. Instead, the departed souls now inhabit a realm of indescribable spiritual delight and pleasure. So what is paradise? So one thing is for sure, one thing we have to get comfortable with is that we're talking about soul concepts, and concepts of soul are beyond us. Like you see in text number 10, you can't imagine the unimaginable. Spiritual word is abstruse and difficult for mortal intellect. So we can try to talk about the greatness of spiritual reward and the world to come, but it's like a blind man trying to appreciate color. You can't. You can only imagine, but you can't fully understand it. It's totally beyond his realm of understanding, and that's what the Gemara says, text number 11. We have you read about these suicide bombers, and they think about what's going to happen to them in the world to come, and different people. And the Gemara says very clearly, the world to come, there's no eating and there's no drinking, and there's no girls and no business and jealousy. You sit and you bask in spiritual intimacy. What's the spiritual presence? So if you ever had a good relationship, the pleasure is the relationship. If you ever had a truly good relationship during the mitzvah, paradise is the ability to appreciate what's really important to it. So, Pesach's coming, family comes over for Pesach, and he's spending time with the family. What are you doing with them? Nothing, just being there. So a person could be with the parents, could be with their spouse, just being in close proximity, just being next to them, that's pleasure. That's paradise. That's the only way. It's the only way we can understand it. So if you think about a relationship, that's very special. That's very special. And the enjoyment you get by being close with that person, that's what the soul. Because there's no really other way to explain it. Okay. So let's get to our side, because we spent a lot of time speaking about heaven and earth. So let's talk about what we contribute to the to the journey. So when a person gets to paradise, what happens? They're there, that's it. They make it. The answer is that no, that's not the case. When a person comes to paradise, the soul is constantly progressing. It's always moving. The difference is that the journey in paradise is predetermined by what we do here. So like this, your life here in this world is not predetermined. You make your own choices. But based on the choices you make here, that is going to determine the journey of the soul. So the soul is always climbing. So we have, the 12 months of judgment. And then after that, every yard site, the soul goes up another level, and on Shabbos it goes up. But that is all predictable based on what we did over here. So why is that? Because the soul down here can't do mitzvahs. We can't do a mitzvah. So we're still in the molding stage. We have in our hands a lump of clay that we can choose to form anything we want. The soul is on a trajectory based on its actions down here. A soul can't do a mitzvah. A soul is not an active world. It's moving. It's on a roller coaster track. It knows exactly where it's going. What's the only way to change that trajectory? What's the only way to change that path? By us down here. When you do a mitzvah, regardless if you do it in memory of your parents, or if your parents are alive, God, thank God, or because they instructed you, the fact of the matter is, your parents gave birth to you, they educated you, you're doing a good deed, you get credit. Look at text number 12, page 146. When individuals act righteously and are standing in their service of their Creator, they generate tremendous merit for the souls of the parents. This merit is simply by virtue of their parents having served as instruments of the birth. It is the parents who enable their soul to be born into this world, which in turn enables the many righteous deeds that they perform. The parents therefore have a share in their meritorious acts. However, it doesn't mean now you can only do mitzvahs on behalf of somebody, of a loved one. You can do mitzvahs even on behalf of someone who is not related. But for that, you have to have intention. So the soul's on a journey, right? Throughout the year, and on a year it takes a leap. So when a child does a mitzvah, because they're essentially connected, automatically it positively affects the soul. But once we gather together and we do a mitzvah in merit of the soul, that changes that changes the journey of the soul. So when is it important? So the first 12 months, when the soul's going through the soul's going through judgment. That's very, very important, that we try to positively influence the journey of the soul as much as possible, because that's when the soul is going through rehab. And if we can support it with mitzvahs and spirituality, it'll positively affect it. So that's why many people, they'll do a lot of mitzvahs, writing a Torah, dedicating books, learning Mishnah, Gemara, and all those different things during 12 months. And even after the 12 months, on the yard site, and on Yizkar, and by the way, the Rebbe spoke about the concept of Yizkar isn't just to say the prayer and then you're off scot-free. The idea of Yizkar is you remember your parents, your loved one, and then you pledge to do a mitzvah. You pledge to give tzedakah, or you pledge to learn in merit of them. So look at figure 4.2, figure 4.3, page 147 and page 148, and you will see this is a list of some of the mitzvahs, obviously, not all, obviously, that we do to benefit the souls, and what we do on a yard site in order to assist the neshama, in order to have an aliyah, it's called, an elevation, that to change the predictable path. But let's end off the class with one final point: the concept of Kaddish. Everybody, I mean, what you see on page 142 and 147 and 148, these are customs, and everybody knows. But the most famous custom is to say Kaddish. Everybody knows we say Kaddish. We say Kaddish for the year, and then again on the yard site. And if you see a text number 13, what are we saying Kaddish? We're talking about that God's name should be sanctified and His kingship should be in the whole world. And you could read and you could read the Kaddish. What is so special about Kaddish? And by the way, we're very short on time, but please read Appendix C, the story of Rabbi Akiva, about the dream he had, page 160. A very interesting encounter. It talks about the benefit and the specialty of saying about saying Kaddish. But why is Kaddish so strong? Why is it so potent? Why is it so much greater than everything else? So text number 14 is very interesting, because text number 14 was authored by Adin Steinsaltz, who we just lost Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz a few months ago, one of the great authors of our time, great contributors to Jewish halacha, Jewish thought. And he says something that we have very powerful. And I'm going to paraphrase. And he says, every single Jew has a part of God inside of him. Every single Jew. So the fact that you identify as a Jew, you are sanctifying God's name. The fact that you wake up in the morning and say, I'm Jewish, you sanctify God's name. Compounded with the fact that everything we've been through. When there's a Lubavitcher boy standing on the street and stops you and says, excuse me, are you Jewish? And you say, yes, that's the sanctification of God's name. The fact that you're walking around, that you exist, is the sanctification of God's name. When a person passes away, there's something missing, something lacking. That person can no longer sanctify God's name. We're missing that voice in the chorus. The harmony is not as harmonious. So what do? We have to fill in the void. Mainly the children have to fill in the void. The children come and say that void that was left because the person is not sanctifying God's name, we are going to sanctify God's name. But I want to make a very, 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 two more times, very, very important note. And unfortunately, people get so caught up in the Kaddish, but they don't realize is, yes, Kaddish is important. And saying Kaddish is every child has to make sure they recite it or arrange it for a parent. But those are just words. You want to know what true sanctification, what true special thing you can do for your parents, for your loved one? Action. Action. If you take upon yourself, in the memory of my father or mother, whatever it is, I'm going to light Shabbos candles, or I'm going to Put on tefillin. I'm going to keep Shabbos a little bit better. No more phone on Shabbos. Even if I don't do it 100%, no more phones on Shabbos, or no more TV on Shabbos, or I'm going to make sure to only buy food in the supermarket with a kosher symbol. That's the most important thing. And that's the stuff that Neshama loves, because you're speaking now Neshama language, you're speaking soul language. Other things that the Neshama can't appreciate. So yes, it's very important to say Kaddish. I'll tell you a story. There was a man, his name was Ichka Gansberg. When his father passed away, he was a teacher somewhere. And in order to go to a minyan to say Kaddish, it would have affected his job. It would have affected his job of teaching, but would it adversely affect his class? So he wrote into the Rebbe and said, what's more important? Saying Kaddish for my father or teaching this class, teaching these kids? The Rebbe said, teach the kids, because you're having a greater impact, and it'll greatly benefit your soul. Action is the most important thing. Reward is nice. Garden of Eden is very nice. But imagine for a moment, someone cured cancer, right? And they won Nobel Peace, the Nobel Prize for curing cancer. Do you think he would walk around saying, look at me, I got a Nobel Prize? No, he would say, I cured cancer. The act itself is the most pleasure, not just the result of it. That's why, as Jewish people, we don't care about the world to come. Yes, we believe in it, and it's an important part, but the most important thing is action down here. Look at text number 15. The Vilna Gaon, it says, page 153. He says the primary reward in the hereafter is the soul returning to its source and uniting with God. Certainly, however, it is even greater when the soul connects with God here in this world. That's why we're going to talk about it in class number 6. That's why when Mashiach comes, the souls are coming back here to do mitzvahs. The Rebbe said on the first anniversary of his wife's passing, he said that the redemption is not just for us. It's for the souls up there, because the souls up there can't do mitzvahs through what the neshamas are doing down here. And this idea is expressed what the Alter Rebbe said, page 154, text number 16. He said, all your Gan Eden and all that's great. I don't want that. I want a relationship with you. And how do we have a relationship with God? We have a relationship with God in this world by lighting the Shabbos candle, by making sure we're conscious of what we eat because God said so, by taking a day off because God said so. That's how we forge a connection. All the other spiritual fluff, that's great. But what's really important is what we do. Now, next week, we're going to talk about what happens if we don't do what we're supposed to. And we're going to talk about reincarnation. That's next week. Exercise 4.4, record the point from today's lesson that resonated with you most. Identify a good deed that you can do in the memory of a deceased loved one. Here are the key points.
Lesson 4. Where we go. 1. God's rewards and punishments are natural consequences of our actions. 2. When we do mitzvot, we forge
What happens?
an intimate relationship with God. In the afterlife, our souls experience the effects of our actions, our relationship with God. This is the greatest possible pleasure, and is also known as paradise, Gan Eden. 3. At times, a soul cannot enter paradise immediately, for its inappropriate actions in this world diminished its capacity to experience spiritual pleasures. Gehinnom, a painful yet cleansing process, is temporary. Every soul ultimately reaches paradise. 4. In Gan Eden, the soul constantly ascends to higher levels. Good deeds performed in a person's memory, including the recital of Kaddish, elevate the soul to higher levels that it cannot attain on its own. 5. What we do here and now is more important than the pleasures or pain of the afterlife. Living in order to receive rewards in the next world, or to avoid heavenly punishment, distracts our focus from where it belongs, increasing goodness and godliness in this world.
Okay, the class will be recorded and we will send it out. I hope you enjoyed it. Mazel tov, everybody. Thank you so much for partnering us on the ride. We accomplished something tremendous today. All thanks to you guys. This week is Purim. Woohoo! And you have to hear the Megillah Thursday night. You have to hear the Megillah on Friday. We're going to be doing an outdoor reading on Thursday. The fast is over 6:50. We're reading the Megillah at 7. Everybody's invited to our property now. Everyone's invited. And then Friday morning, we're going to read the Megillah again, and we'll do another reading Friday afternoon. All the best. Have a freilichen, happy Purim, an easy fast, and we should only know good news. Take care, guys.
Thank you.